Aloha and welcome to this module on Maven. And basically I'm just going to give you a very quick overview and show you some of the things that you'll be doing as part of the assignment to give you the vibe of it. Really you're going to learn Maven by actually playing with it yourself. So to kind of give you an overall global sense, the build file for Maven is called pom.xml, project object model, I think that refers to. And Maven makes a lot of assumptions about how things should work, and for this class we're just going to conform to as many assumptions as we can because that just makes our life easier. So you'll see there's a way that the directory structures are laid out. For example, you have a source directory, and inside there should be a main and a test subdirectories, and then inside those will be Java directories, and then you'll have your main system inside the source main Java, and then you have all your test code split off into that separate directory structure. That means you can compile your system without compiling your test cases, and in fact you can have dependencies or libraries that you require for your test cases that you don't need for just compiling the main system. So there are some benefits to making that choice. And then Maven has this very long list. I haven't counted it, probably a couple dozen different phases that the build process goes through. And in the default build, many of these phases don't really have any actions attached to them, but they're basically, you can think of them as being hooks where, depending on what you're doing, you can add new non-default or override the existing actions in the build lifecycle. And I've highlighted in yellow some of the more common lifecycle phases. So you have an initialization phase, then you do a compile, then you do a test, then you do a package, verify, and deploy, and so forth. Just so you can see that in fact that there's a lot of these other kind of hooks that are in there to enable you to do various things, but it still goes through the the kind of the standard build lifecycle. Okay, so next. One of the important thing in Maven is that you specify third-party libraries as dependencies, and that Maven will automatically download these libraries, as part of the build. And there's really no good way to not have a third-party library not as a dependency. You can look around on the web, and there are some things you can do. But the basic idea is that if you've got a third-party library that's not available from one of the public Maven repositories, what you have to do is you have to use this install task or goal to put it into a local repository on your own computer, and then when you run the Maven build, it will look there as well. And so that's something you'll see with Robocode. Robocode isn't available publicly, so we're going to have to use this install goal to take the Robocode jar files that we've installed using the normal Robocode task and then put them into local Maven repository. And then, as I said before, Maven really is into this idea of convention over configuration. That works. When it works, it works great. When it doesn't work, it kind of fails catastrophically. But hopefully it'll be just fine for us. So what I've done is created this little package called Robocode PMJ to Cruiser. The actual robot doesn't do anything of much interest, but I do use it as, it has an example test, a few example test cases, and a very simple robot definition, which enable you to see how to run test cases and do that kind of stuff. Okay, so now let's get rid of we'll get rid of PowerPoint, and what I want you to see here is the hopefully that beeping will go. It went away. Okay, here's the assignment about Maven. Well, first we'll go to the Introduction to Build Systems, and you can see the screencast. This is the screencast I'm making right now, and then these really good articles about why everyone eventually hates or leaves Maven. Don't take that as, geez, why the heck are we learning Maven when he gives you this article about how everybody hates Maven. Remember, you have to eventually hate Maven. You don't necessarily hate Maven initially. Many people love Maven initially. And I hope you love Maven initially. And maybe, you'll never really actually get to that point of hating Maven, although he claims that everybody does. I don't know that that's actually true. And then there's a whole bunch of interesting discussion on Y Combinator about it. So anyway, we'll go to the this the assignment. Okay, and I just want to kind of, just to make sure you don't get lost, I want to kind of quickly go through some of these things. First step, going to the download page of Maven. You're going to download 3.0.4 and not one of those older versions. And then you're going to go through the installation instructions as appropriate for your environment. For Unix, you're going to go do all these things. And at the conclusion, it says run Maven minus version to make sure things are correctly installed. And this isn't going to be good. And so I can do that right here, Maven minus version. And you can see it prints out some stuff indicating that everything's all good. Okay, and that's basically it for the installation process. Take you a few minutes to do it, no big deal. Then the next thing you want to do is this Maven in 5 minutes tutorial, which asks you to do the minus version trick again. And then it says, go ahead and do this. Okay, and I'm just going to show you how you might actually invoke that. And maybe I'll actually do this. So if I type this, okay, and what we're going to see is that as a result, we've now got this new directory called my app. So if I cd my app, okay, I've now got this Maven project that's been defined in that particular directory because of the fact that I called it that. And then if we keep scrolling down, it'll tell you a little bit about the POM file, so read through all that. And then it says, okay, well, why don't we try building the project? So what the heck? Let's invoke these commands. So this is kind of, I'm trying to show you what I'm wanting you to do as you go through these instructions, is to not just read them, but actually just do them. That both makes sure that Maven is working good, appropriately on your system, and also just, helps you get used to the basic commands. And so it builds this thing. What you'll find when you do yours, okay, unlike me, you're going to find that as you type through these commands or run these commands, Maven's going to just be downloading, and sometimes that might take a few minutes depending upon your network connection. In my case, it wasn't really that bad actually. But the point being is that as it downloads all these libraries, it's going to cache them locally in your .m2 directory, in your home directory. So you won't have to download them more than once, and so it's just kind of a one-time cost. So we can see that in this case, it compiled this sample project, and then it ran tests, and the tests all passed. That's a good sign. And you can read all about it. In fact, you could even, kind of invoke this command, which again, I think it's good to try invoking these things for the most part. And you can see, yeah, you get the same output. Here you read more about phases, which are good, about the clean, the site. You can do all that stuff if you want. So that's the 5-minute tutorial, which is good. And then what I would do is go into the 10-minute tutorial, or the longer tutorial. I don't know how long this actually takes you, and read through this. And some of it is repetitive, and so you don't necessarily have to type everything again, but it just gives you a little bit more detailed information about how things work. Okay, plugins, we'll start using those. I'll hopefully guide you through most of those, but that's good to read about and get a sense for. So spend a few minutes looking at this page as well. Okay, then we get to the Robocode PMJ Decruiser package, and if we click on the README link, you go here, which is actually an anchor within this GitHub project called Robocode PMJ Decruiser. Okay, and so what I want you to do next is basically just go through these README directions. All right, and the first one is install Robocode. You may be tempted to skip this, but you shouldn't, because there's a very important change that you need to from the standard Robocode setup. Excuse me. In the standard Robocode setup, you just install this Robocode 1.7.4.0 setup.jar, but for the purpose of our class, we're going to also implement this plugin which provides testing support. Okay, so you're going to have to download a second jar file. You've already downloaded that one, of course. Now you're going to have to download this one and install it. And after you've installed it, the basic result is if I go to my robocode libs directory, what you'll find is that there's now a new jar file in that libs directory called robocode.testing.jar. Okay? And that's going to be important because when we write test cases for robocode robots, we're going to want to inherit from a class which is contained in that jar file. Okay? Okay, so going back to here, so we're going to install robocode. You'll have to do a little bit more installation, make sure it's okay. Run the system manually from the command line. That should be real easy for you to check. Then you're going to install Maven. Well, you've presumably already just done that. Then you're going to download this particular package. Now, if you know about Git, you know that there's some cooler ways to do this. But since we haven't got to Git at this point in the semester, the kind of simple way to do it is to click this zip button, which is going to result in the zip file being downloaded, or a zip file containing the latest, the master branch, the latest sources, the head of the master branch to the downloads directory. And so I can do a jar -tf robocode to unzip this. I'm sorry, a jar -xf to unzip it, and then I can go in there. Okay, and now you see I've got the source files and the pom.xml file, and it maybe is worth just looking at. So we see this top level thing, and then there's a source, and then there's a main and a test, and in the Java directory we've got a pmj, and then the decruiser file, and then the test directory, we've got Java, pmj, and then we've got 3 test files, or test cases associated with different ways to test the decruiser robot. We'll go into this in more detail when we get to the testing phase coming right up in just a few days. But you can take a sneak peek at this if you want. Right now, we're just dealing with build systems, so you just can view this as kind of black box code. Okay, so let's go back here. So we've downloaded the package. Unzip it. That's all we really have to do to install it. It's no big deal. But now we have to do another extra step, which is we have to tell Maven about the robocode jar files. Okay, and so the way we're going to do that is we have to invoke each of these commands individually. So I'm going to copy the first one to show you how that works. And because of the way those lines are written, you have to be in the robocode libs directory when you invoke it, and you'll see why in a second if I do this. You can see the file. I don't have a fully specified path name for that, which is good because different OSs are going to have different ways of specifying fully specified paths. So you got to be in the directory where all these jar files are in order for this to work correctly. So here I am. I type return, and you can see when it works correctly, it basically just takes that file and it's going to install it into your .m2 directory in the appropriate spot. Okay, so I've already done this, for all of them, so I'm not going to do them anymore. But basically, one by one, go through these. I think there's seven files here, or 8 maybe, and just do them one by one, and then all of the robocode files, jar files, libraries will be in your local Maven repository, such that when we actually want to run the system, Maven will be able to find them. Okay, so now the next thing is to build and test the system, and you use the test target, but there's a couple things that are a little different, that Maven doesn't quite expect, and this is actually more a reflection upon the way testing is set up in Robocode than anything to do with Maven. The Robocode testing module needs to know where your standard Robocode installation is, not the Maven one, but where you've installed it for regular kinds of execution. And so we need to provide that via a system property called robocode.home. This is the syntax for doing that. And so in order to invoke the testing code of the system, we have to invoke this test goal, but also provide this system property. This is the way you do it. And so we go down here, and in fact we'll make this full screen for a second. Okay, and we evoke this. Oh, you know what? The only problem here is that we're in the wrong directory. Okay, so I'll go out, and then I'll go to downloads, Robocode. Okay, so let's try it again, actually, in this spot, and hopefully things will work a little better. Okay, so now it's compiling things, and now it's running these test cases, and we got no test errors, and the build was successful, so everything's all good. We can also see that now there's this target directory, and we can go in there if we wanted to and see what that's all about. And you can see there's a classes subdirectory with our PMJ classes, and then there's a test classes directory with the classes from the compiled classes from the test code. There's the report, JUnit test reports, all sorts of stuff in here. Okay. So that's how that works. So now we built and test the system, and I show you some output there. If you want to, now one of the things that's going to happen, the way the testing again works, is that we create this PMJ decruiser robot, and then we actually copy it into the robots directory of our Robocode installation. This is not ideal. I will gladly admit that. Okay, so here you can see it right here, right? So in our robots directory of our standard installation, now here's our PMJ decruiser, okay? But it turns out that this is difficult, and believe me, I've mucked around for quite a while in the Robocode system, trying to figure out if there's a way I could get around this, and there's no real easy way to fix this problem. So what I've decided to do instead is to simply copy the file over into the robots directory and then provide a clean target to remove it. So if you wanted to get rid of this development robot from your installation, what you can do is get back to a terminal and invoke the clean goal, which has been augmented with a goal to delete the robots PMJ directory. Okay, so now if we go into robots, you can see there's no more PMJ in there. Okay, so it's a little funky. It'd be better actually if it deleted it automatically as part of the testing process, but for various reasons I didn't do that way. Okay. Okay, so then after that, the next thing I want you to do is take this system, install it into Eclipse, and maybe I'll give you a quick look at that, how that looks. Okay, so in order to do that, let me quickly close, and I will delete this project. Okay, so in order to do that, the basic idea, it's too bad I don't have my menus on this side. I'm going to do a import, and then I'm going to do an import inside the Maven folder of an existing Maven project. This is the key thing. Okay, it's not up here in the general space, but it's in this Maven space. We'll click next, select our root directory, which is going to be the downloads directory. Okay, so we see that, and then it looks around and it finds the pom.xml for our Robocode thing, and then we say finish. Okay, and now we have this decruiser project. Okay, and the great thing is that it's got all of our dependencies set up. Okay, so we can compile, we can do all the kinds of things we want. Okay, so here's our decruiser robot. Here is the one of the test cases. I'll go over this in more detail later. And then in particular, we can click on the POM, and I'm just going to display for you the XML part of it. Okay, and this a little wider. So what you can see is that we've defined our group ID, which is the package that our code is in, to be PMJ. The name of the robot is decruiser. Here's the URL to the GitHub project where it's actually kept. We define this source encoding so that we don't get warning messages. And then we specify all our dependencies. So JUnit is one of our dependencies. Robocode, the robocode.jar file is one. The robocode battle jar file is another one that's needed for compile. The core, repository, host, Pico container, and this testing. These are all dependencies. Then you can see a couple things that we do for the purpose of testing. One is after we compile, we want to copy the contents of the target classes directory, which is the PMJ and then the interior robot definition, over to the robots directory. That makes it accessible during testing so that the runtime system sees it. And then this is in addition to the clean target where we're going to actually delete the following directory from the robots directory. Okay, so not too bad in terms of a POM file. I mean, you start to get a hint about how crazy long these things can be when you see this, 20 lines here, just to say something completely silly that you could do in one line. Okay, so XML is definitely not it's an extremely verbose way of specifying things, and something that people really don't like, and has led to some of these more procedural approaches to build systems. But this is our POM file. It's worth a look at. So to just look at the rest of the instructions, you install it into Eclipse the way I've shown you, and then use it as a template for your own development. That's the last part of the assignment, which is to take your competitive robot that you've been developing and create a Maven-based project that supports compilation and so forth of it. And we'll use that essentially for the rest of the Robocode. And as we get into testing and quality assurance and configuration management, we're going to be using this project that you're working on as the example for that. So that's the introduction to Maven. Hope you enjoyed it, and good luck.